Good morning. Welcome. This is EchelonOrchid episode 33. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and joining me for Sunday Coffee, my co-host, TK Eppley.
Good morning, everyone.
How's it going?
It's going very well, Daniel. How are you?
Good. Are you drinking good coffee this morning, or?
I always drink good coffee. Life's too short to drink shitty coffee or crappy whiskey.
Yeah, that's why I'm getting into the whiskey business. It's funny because I can't remember who it was, but he's I think he was some Delta guy, because he was on the Joe Rogan show, and he was talking about how because he has one of the coffee companies. I don't know if it's Black Rifle Company Coffee or something like that. But he was, I would order this, huge, this machine, to make coffee, and I'm doing this and doing this. And he's like, wow, I sound like a real douchebag. So I better be like a really, really good,
right.
special forces guy here, or I'm going to take, shit, for forever if I'm not good. So
yeah, it's funny because I don't know, it's kind of odd. The two things that I know a lot of former soft guys have gone into is making coffee or making beer.
Yeah.
Really good friend of mine, Mike Stacks, owns Bold Mariner Brewing, and they just had their 5th anniversary yesterday. Big event, just kick ass. But he's a great frogman, and now he's out there making great beer. And he's just kicking ass and growing a business. And in the Mid-Atlantic, is from living there, is a very crowded market for microbrews.
Oh, yeah.
And he's really expanded. He makes a wide array of great beer, and I'd do anything to promote companies like that, because they're out there, and it's the thing. It's like, hey, I don't want to embarrass myself in front of my peers. It's like the hallmark of a 20-year soft career is I'm not trying to seek fame and glory. I just don't want to get crap from all my friends.
Yeah.
And it leads you to say, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it well, right? Because I get how you can make crappy beer, right? Because we sell bazillion cans of it, and it's on the side of every race car. But coffee, again, it's an artisan thing. And there's, even here at the beach, there's, we have a bunch of different coffee roasters. There's this little artisanal community of people that help each other out, and the coffee scene is a part of that now too. So yeah, I think if you're going to get out there and do something, don't make it suck. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a great motto just for life. If you're going to do something, just, don't suck at it. Right. And actually try to do it very well, because why waste your time? Like, if you're not good at it, then right. Do it, right? Go find that. I have to tell my people constantly, look, our jobs as leaders is to put you in a position to be successful. Right. And if you're not good at this, there's no shame in saying, look, I'm not good. Now, my question is, do you want to be good at it? And because if you do, well, that's a different conversation. Because there's a lot of people that, like golf is a great example. They enjoy golf, but they really suck at it. But they're trying to do things in order to get better.
Well, I think the questions we've always asked our employees, when you talk about when they're not meeting the metric, right? Whether they tell you or you have to go, hey, by the way, I don't know if you get this, but we got to do something different. Is, do you want to be better at this, or do you want to do something else? Right? I mean, in technology, that's the great thing, especially with young folks. When they come in, post intern, like first job, they might not be great at that, but that doesn't mean they're terrible at tech. That just means that's not their cup of tea. And let's go find them something they're good at, if they want to be good at it. But yeah, if you go out and you start a business, especially, like you're doing, like a lot of folks they get in and doing some little artisan thing with food, woodworking, something, anything. It's like, hey, be really good at it. There's one of my oldest friends in the SEAL community started Valhalla's Forge, and they do amazing work, whether it's building custom desks that look like airplane wings, all matters of plaques and everything. And the great thing about it isn't the fact that he's a great artisan, right? And he grew up in the SEAL community. He was a breacher and like that. And so, working with tools, working with hands, it's just making stuff is a part of his being, and he loves it. But what he's done is he's gone out and gotten this incredible group of young men and women to come there and work and learn how to be artisans as well. And it's not just the physical act of, hey, don't hit it right here, hit it right here. Here's how you drill this or press this. It's the art of work ethic.
Yeah.
right? And being good at what you do. And I think that's as much with any artisan skill. Like, I think as you grow and you're going to need people to work in your whiskey business, who are you going to look for? You're going to look for old, tired people. You're going to look for young people that are maybe not thought about doing this, but hey, I was a chemistry major in college. I really didn't like being a chemistry major, but I understand the principles. Let me go do this. Right? I think that's hugely important.
It is, and this is with many of the things. I think one of the biggest changes that happened with me for my MBA was understanding what it means for sustainable business. Yep. And that aspect and that notion that it is an anarchist capitalist position is for that. And I don't mean anarchy. We're talking about the aspect of, hey, my local business makes these things, and because of that, I have a product, in this case, so when I'm done with the grains, what can I do with these grains? Nothing. They're useless to me.
Right.
So I can do a couple of things. I could have another company that they make bread, they make muffins, they're a bakery, because those spent grains can do that. Or I could give it to a farmer who needs feed.
Right.
And then that's a tax write-off. There's that. And that farmer stuff is doing things, but things stay in a community. But we're all making money. We're just making products that other businesses and consumers, and I think, also happen to need, rather than a large corporation coming in and being the jack of all trades and offering no real good product like a Walmart.
Right. It comes down to a lot of it is, people shop for price. They don't shop for value. And what's the value, right? Where are you finding value? And some people do find value in the fact I can go to pick your big box store and they can walk from one aisle to the other and walk out and they're done and they don't ever have to do anything. And other people say, hey, I want to go down and help the guy that was down the street from me. I mean, how many times do you go out to chain restaurants?
Recently?
Oh, in general. I mean, I don't.
Hardly ever. I
can't even figure out one that appeals to me.
Yeah. Well, Chipotle.
Yeah, but even then, I don't really. Like I said, it's not. I would say, yeah, if I got to pick one of the fast foods, I can church that up to be the least offensive to my health as possible, probably. But I don't. There's.
Yeah, I'm not
interested. A
interested.
Local place that opened up here that you could say is almost a competitor. To that the same style of food, but it's really clean when when it comes out, and it's a family owned thing that we know the people here, right? And so I would tend to shade towards that, right? And I think that's where things are going locally, right? I think in COVID, throughout this COVID period, you've seen a lot of local businesses be sustained by local, the locals are in their area, basically giving their finger to the man with, big corporate thing, that abuse the PPP money or, however they did that, right? Whether they did or not, like if that's the appearance of it, then they're naturally going to gravitate back towards the guy that lives around the corner as opposed to some corporate entity. I don't know where they're from.
Yeah, and it's true, because when you talk about not appealing, it really doesn't appeal because, one, I know there's no artistry to it. Right?
No,
those cooks are just taking whatever was there, and really now they're just cooks. They're not chefs. They're not
right. They're line cooks.
Right. They are just, all right, I just need to make sure this particular thing is cooked to this temperature. That's it. They just have to watch it. It's not. There's no artistry to it. And when you go to some local places, they have to have that artistry. And I like it when the menu changes based on the season. That tells me that they're also most likely buying local.
Right. There's a butcher shop in Norfolk called Pendulum Meats, and they have a map of Virginia and Northeast North Carolina. And, it's great. I might want steak, but if they got a hog in this week, you better want to have pork, right? Because it's literally, you're back there watching them cut it up and it ends up in the case, right? And they put a push pin in from where that animal came from, and everything's less than 100 miles away from the thing. And what they've done is now they're making baked goods. right? They're making muffins, they're making bagels, making English muffins, and I have not had them, but apparently they're really good. And same, they're sourcing like one of the local coffee roasters. Their stuff is in there, and at the Saturday market, their meat is in with the coffee roaster stuff. And that to me is the thing. Is when somebody says, "Oh, I got a dry aged steak," well, where'd you get that from? How I don't know where that cow came from, right? I mean, short of anything, is these folks actually knew the cow's name, right? And I think that's important. I actually think it's more important for vegetables. Because if you look at a vegetable, like they'll pick them before they're ripe, right? Big ag farming. They pick them before they're ripe, they transport it, then they have to gas it or do something to at least make it look fresh, and then it ends up in your store, right? And so, again, one of the things about living here is we have a great ag community and great farms that, you might have to be creative in the winter a little bit, but for the most part, you can, at least 3/4 of the year here, you can eat something that was in the ground down the street from where you live.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me is when I go to a grocery store and you take a look at the apples, and I kind of go, how many times in life does something look almost identical? Like
Right.
like apples, there should be irregularities in an apple tree, right? There's going to be some ones that they don't look perfect, but in a grocery store they all look perfect. That tells me those are probably not local; they're mass-produced apples.
When I was a kid, 15, 16 years old, I worked on a farm, and this is out in the suburbs of Boston. And, we get up in the morning, we pick corn, to go pick ground vegetables. And, and it's funny because it was definitely like, it's the 70s, right? The women worked in the building, the men worked out in the fields, right? There was no cross pollination of what went on with that. They'd sort vegetables. At the end of the day, the ones that weren't perfect, we could take home, because they were selling local stuff at a premium, right? And their corn was renowned and a thing. But what they were really known for, nobody really thought about it, was they had 35, 40,000 tomato plants. And we used to pick tomatoes from 10 in the morning till we were done. Because every day the trucks would back up, and they supported all the local farm stands that were downtown. All right, so you were actually getting something that was 20 miles away, and it was a fresh tomato, and it just came out of just came off the vine, so to speak. And I mean, we had salt shakers out in the trucks, and you wanted to have it, you basically cleaned it up like a thing, and you went through the thing, and then every one of the tomato patches, which were, you couldn't, curvature of the earth, you couldn't see some of them from one end to the other sometimes, but they were separated by apple trees. And then in the fall, we would take the pointy ladders and get up there, and on a Saturday, and go create hijinks. You were getting out on the limb trying to get the last apple, and somebody would take the ladder from you. Well, I'm 16 years old. If I fall on rubber, I'll bounce. Now it's a death sentence if I'm up in a tree like that.
Fall down, break a hip.
At least one, maybe all 6 of them, or whatever else goes on down there.
Yeah. It's I was watching this documentary, and there's some things in there that I somewhat question, but what's true.
What was the documentary?
Oh, I can't remember the name of it. It's on Netflix right now. It's about this guy basically. I'll wind up looking it up, but the premise is he's like, look, I lived an extraordinary life doing all these things, and now I'm looking back and I kind of go, wow, look at all these these things that have basically we've done to the world, and while there's some things in there I kind of I'm like, I don't know if that's entirely true, but what is true is the coral reefs are dying, the rainforests are diminishing, and humans don't have any predators. Like, there's nothing that can do anything. But he started off, documenting all of these things when he was much, much younger, when he was doing this in the 1950s, and now he's 93 years old, and he's like, wow, if we keep on this pace, then by 2030, you're going to have you'll see the Amazon rainforest is going to start catching on fire, just like it's happening in California, because there's all these things. So it's like the amount of overfishing that has been done, all these what big corporations in the name of making money has done to the planet. And we where the part I do like what he says, look, this is, he goes, not really reversible, but we can change. We don't have to do this. There are other ways to get the same result. Because he said it's not like that we took down the rainforest without purpose. What's replaced these rainforests are farms. So, right. You know, we've taken the wood. We need the wood. We need to make more food. So it's turned into farmland. But then we lose the aspect of having a sustaining culture, in terms, not culture, habitat.
Right.
And losing that aspect of a habitat is bad. It's like that with anything. So let me see if I can find the name of it.
I think when you start, it's funny because we vilify certain groups of people, right? And I was thinking about the timber industry in particular. Like the timber industry plants more trees than they cut down, right? It might not have been the case 40, 50, 60 years ago, right? I don't know. But this concept of sustainability is how quickly can I replace what I use? And or find multiple uses down to what we used to consider waste into, you know, and use all that. And when I was a kid, my dad used to be able to tell what color the paper factory was what paper they were making because of the color of the river. Right? Can you imagine seeing that now? I mean, you know, collectively, I don't care what side of the political spectrum on. You're like, what are you people doing? Like, get your thing together, right? Like, we can't have this, right? And I think that's thing. But plastics industry, I you know, grew up in a heavy duty plastics industry. Where I grew up, people look old early. Right. And nothing's seeping into the water. Nothing's doing, you know, what have we consumed? Right. The people that stay there, they look old younger. And I think we're getting better at it. And I think as a nation, we're on a glide slope of, you know, reducing CO2, cleaning up, doing what we're doing. It's not fast enough for some groups of people. But, you know, when you say, hey, look, the developing world in China, they're doing the opposite. Right, as we reduce carbon footprint, for example, is one of the ways to measure. If we reduce that, they're increasing it. And you know, the one thing we can't escape is nobody, like, pollution doesn't look at the border of a country.
Right.
I thought it was a great. So, at my kid's school, they had an astronaut come and speak. Right? And new astronaut and everything like that. It was and one of the things he did when he spoke with the young kids, like K through 8, you know, he was answering questions like, well, how do you go poop in space? Right? Because that's what kindergartners and 7th graders want to know, right?
Right, but right.
You got to high school, the high school kids, it was a different presentation. And the last slide was, well, you know, from experience, it was a picture from the space station of the Middle East. And all he said, you know, he asked what it was, and some of the kids were like, I think it's the Middle East. And he goes, what don't you see here? And they were kind of stumped. He goes, you don't see borders. Right. And that, you know, I think that's a metaphor for, you know, pollution and all the things that we do that are adverse to the planet is what are the borders like? And if you're going to say we can talk about the Paris Climate Accord or anything like that. But the net of it is everybody pulling that wheelbarrow in the same direction, right? And if we're not, and countries are still, you know, terrorizing, you know, by adding that, you know, tons of CO2 every day of the week, which if you're going to advocate to build more coal-fired power plants, that's what you're doing. And, you know, the U.S. in particular is not, right? They're done with coal-fired plants, but you know, down here in Norfolk, you see piles of coal lined up, getting ready to go on ships because they're going overseas to the countries that are building it.
Yeah. So the name of I put it out there. It's David Attenborough, A Life on Our Planet, and it's interesting that you mentioned about the CO2 because there's a different thing. So like, you know, trees, plants, they need CO2, right? So I think, you know, and a lot of what I've been reading is saying that we're burning 1 million years worth of stuff that's been in the planet, and that's of course, you know, putting all of the CO2 up there. Well, it's a double-edged sword with one of the things that I read. That CO2 and the barrier that we're creating, you know, with the atmosphere, can help to protect against sun flares. but at the same time, it's making the Earth hotter. We are now on average 2 degrees Celsius hotter than what we were back in the 1940s, where it's been pretty sustainable. But that 2 degrees Celsius has changed things, and it's because, well, yeah, we're putting more CO2 out there, but it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
Unflare, if it actually, could do a lot of damage. Because that's like an EMP, isn't it?
Here's the thing, and there's a guy. He's an obnoxious effer. His name's Dan Pena. He's on all the social media. He's a billionaire guy, and he was at a conference. And you know me, I don't like people that yell and scream at things and at anything, right? And the lady's standing up, railing against billionaires and money, and they're causing all the climate problems and everything like that. And he said, he goes, okay, ma'am, let me answer your question. And once he got her calmed down and she got in her seat, he talked about having gone to Antarctica and, taking the core samples and then talking about how kind of the arc of warmth and cooling. I mean, because in the 70s, we were in the global cooling period, right? It's why we changed it from global warming to climate change, right? Because it's changing, right? And it's a fluid thing. But he said this, all these people say, hey, we've got to do something, or in the next 50 years, 30 years, the ocean's going to rise, and they pick an arbitrary level, right? The one he settled on was 10 feet, because that's probably the one that most alarmists will go after in that finite period of time. And he said the following, he goes, if the sea level were to rise 10 feet, the whole Southeast is gone. Right? He goes, first up, the whole Southeast is gone. He goes, Florida's off the map. He goes, so let's just take that. He goes, I look at this as a banker, as an investment banker. And he goes, every time I purchase a piece of property or do a real estate transaction, it gets indemnified and insured. And he goes, and if this was a true problem that we had to worry about the next 30 years in the fashion that the extremists advocate for, then there would be an addendum in big letters that if this happens, we're not paying for your house. Because no company could assume that risk.
Right.
Right. And so he's like, hey, is the climate changing? Yes. But let's have a rational discussion about how fast and what we need to do to get there. Right. And that, I think, in anything in life, whether it's in a relationship with your kids, at work, whatever, it's like, hey, how can we have a rational discussion even when the worst could happen? And I think that's one of the things that, like, military leaders, good ones anyway, learn that, hey, what we're going to do or what can be done, it could have catastrophic effect to life and limb. How do we mitigate risk and make a smart decision and use our resources wisely? Right? That's where the discussion goes off the rails, because people want to get into their feelings and not go, okay, what are we doing and how are we executing this? How can we be better, but not financially ruin a nation or multiple nations, right? And I think that if you're gonna say we've got to do this, what are the natural steps from where we're at now to completely green? Right? Because think about just battery storage potential in the last 10 years. Right? Go 2000, I'll think 15 years, 2005, 2008 photovoltaic storage as opposed to what it is now. It's orders of magnitude better. Right? What point do we need to get to before that's a cost-effective way to do business? Because you can't break a society financially because we're going to be green. Right? We have to walk. We didn't get here overnight. We can't just turn around and go the other way overnight. One, I think, is all the technology doesn't exist that's cost-effective in a way we're going to do this. But you're not going to stop people from flying airplanes.
No, you're not. And this is where I look at it and go, okay, I don't think electric is the way, because I think batteries have a different problem, and we're taking more from the earth, I think, in just terms of making it.
But that's what I call vanity environmentalism. Right?
Yeah.
I can't see how they mine for lithium.
Yeah.
Right. I can't see how and more importantly, when I plug that in at night, I'm not going to a gas tank, but somewhere there's probably a coal-fired power plant right now powering up your car at night. So it's the same net.
Yep. Right. And then I wonder why we haven't explored more, and maybe we have, and it's just not out there popular, but why aren't we exploring more with hydrogen?
I don't know. Is it, I don't know where the technology glide slope is on that.
Well, I've only recently started looking into it, so it's literally very rudimentary. It's highly combustible, and of course it doesn't produce CO2 because it's hydrogen.
Yeah, hence the name.
Yeah. But there are, and not that this is a great, necessarily source of information, but where I first heard it was, I don't know how long ago, but it was on Jim Cramer's Real Money Talk, talking about why he doesn't, he's like, there's alternatives to Tesla. And I don't think, this is Jim Cramer talking, I don't think Elon is on the right path. He's doubling and tripling down on this, whereas Fisk and some of these others are looking at more and more on, how can we make hydrogen work?
Right.
And I'm like, never, so.
Well, because I'm going to, and I'm not being completely informed, is I'm going to also say that the byproduct of the consumption of that hydrogen is probably water.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
And is the byproduct that water comes out, is it steam? Is that actually, are we doing something to raise humidity? And I'm talking in micro environmental stuff, right? I don't know. This will be good homework this week. I'll have to go look it up because we might talk about it again sometime, and I don't want to be misinformed or misinforming people.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just, I know this wasn't what we were originally supposed to talk about. So
that's fine, though. That's how our lives work, though, Dan. There's a lot of times we get on and we talk about stuff that we hadn't planned on.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll save those in our at least for the next 30 minutes. We'll get back to the Constitution here.
Yeah.
So TKU had said that if they had to take the Second Amendment away, you want to take away the Third Amendment as well.
Right, which is quartering troops, right? And as I said before, the Bill of Rights was, for the most part, a direct rebuke against colonial rule, right? Like, what don't we like about the overhandedness or heavy-handedness of the British monarchy? We don't like the fact we can't say what we want, we can't worship what we want, so that's the First Amendment. Hey, you know what? If we're allowed to have guns, it's a fair fight when people start arguing. The Third Amendment is, hey, the monarchy would just show up at your house and move in and tell you to go to the barn or get out or whatever. Hey, we're here and our troops thing. So we said, and I'll read a thing: no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. And unless I'm unaware and I want some legal expert at me, do we have a law that says they're allowed to be quartered on your premises? I don't think it's. To me, this is like one of the most simple, elegant rights that we have. Like, hey, I don't show up. You can't. No, get away. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. So I wonder. The interesting part about that is, what defines war?
What does nor in time of war unless prescribed by law, right? But, and like I said, what's the law?
Prescribed by law part is the
right.
Yeah, and in peace nor in war.
Nor without consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law, which says, hey, at the time there was no law for it, right? But they allowed for somebody to change that if needed, right? And to the best of my ability, to the best of my knowledge, that's not been a contentious. When people show up on the steps of the Supreme Court with placards running around, it's never been about troops being quartered in your home. My point about the Third Amendment in particular is, for the most part, we know the First, Second, and the Fifth as Americans, right? That's the ones we're conditioned to know. The Fifth largely from television, right? Because most of us don't end up in the legal system in a manner where we've got to exercise our right not to perjure or incriminate ourselves. But we know about the first, right? Because it's the foundation of us being able to be in public and run our mouth as we see fit, as long as we're doing others no harm. And then the second is our right to bear arms, right? And so a lot of times when people are out running their mouth about either the first or the second and how they want to modify or get rid of one, right? And I do this from a position of being a fairly strict constitutionalist. Not that, I think everything we do needs to be unencumbered and unrestricted. But if I say, hey, I'll give you the second, you give me the third, and they look at you quizzically, then okay, you're not talking about the fundamental rights of us as Americans. You're cherry picking.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want to cherry pick. I want to talk about the things that make us Americans, right? That we should be able to stand up at the top of our lungs and say something that somebody disagrees with. And more importantly, we have a right. It's our responsibility, because we have the right to say what we think, whether you like it or not. We have the responsibility to listen to others espouse things that we disagree with. And coincidentally, folks, whether you like it or not, that's how this country became great, and that's how we've had great discovery in science, technology, politics, everything. Right? The world's greatness is defined by dissent. Right. And that is at the heart of the First Amendment. Right. And it's like the Third Amendment to me is, like I said, it's a placeholder for for me to go to somebody, hey, you're really fighting for an idea, right? Which is, what the Bill of Rights would say, hey, we're going to have this idea and we think this should be the base. This is the foundation of it. Or are you just cherry picking because you have a political opinion? Right. I think that's the kind of the thing, which I like the kind of the way they did it. Hey, you can say whatever you want. You can worship to wherever you can assemble peacefully. Right. And that's the big thing in the first peaceful assembly. And then, hey, if the first, like Dave Chappelle says, hey, they got the Second Amendment in case the first doesn't work out. Right. And I think that's, thing. And then the Third Amendment is like, hey, leave the troops out of this. And then we roll back into, hey, people just can't show up and roll into your house to stay in the form of the troops. And then now we roll into the Fourth Amendment and we start talking about your right to not be searched or have people come on your premises without reasonable or plausible cause. All right, I think it's elegant in the way that you're walking that path. Does that make sense? To me, that's always kind of, as I looked at it, it was like, hey, what's the next thing? Hey, you can't have troops in here. And by the way, you can't have anybody in here unless they produce a warrant, they have probable cause, and anything now that's kind of been legally defined. But still, you don't, police just don't show up at your house and go running in without a warrant.
Yeah, and that gets into to that Fourth Amendment aspect. And I think and there's part of it, that aspect of unreasonable search and seizure is this rule called fruit from the poisonous tree. This means that if a police officer or any law enforcement official were to enter your home without a warrant, anything that is seen, it doesn't necessarily matter. You could have 1,000 pounds of cocaine sitting right there, and
puff, puff, pass.
Yeah, it's inadmissible because the government committed an illegal act, and nothing good can come from an illegal act. And I really look at this from a multitude of different things, because that is a very long-standing rule. That means it doesn't matter. Like I take this to what Snowden did. He committed an illegal act. I look at this the same way with illegal immigrants that have entered this country because they entered illegally. Yeah. You can't have a good thing happen from an illegal act, because if we take it away for those two cases, then why should the government have to follow it? It's to me it's an all or nothing rule.
Right. And I think when we start looking at the narrative, and if you're in that group of people that believes that no matter how somebody shows up on our shores, we should allow them all in, you want to change that from illegal immigrant to undocumented. All right, because by removing the word illegal, you now muddy the waters as to whether or not what's the conditions under which they can stay.
Yeah.
Right. And I was not starting a discussion on illegal immigration or immigration at all. Right. But when you start changing modifiers, then those modifiers matter in the public discourse. Right. And it's why when you watch news programs and somebody gets on there and they start using the word illegal, the host is usually trying to say, you mean undocumented. And when the person goes, no, I mean illegal. They didn't come here by lawful means. Right. And so I think, in anything we do, right, it's like there's the old saying, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. Well, the inverse is true, right? It's never the right time to do the wrong thing, right? And I don't care what your intent was, right? Now, this comes down to policy, right? If you look at Snowden in particular, and I'm going to do this in a generals thing because this is, both of us have worked for the government in different functions over the time, but do you trust the whistleblower mechanism?
Ultimately, no, I don't.
Right, but there you go, right? That's it. And if you don't trust if you don't feel without recrimination, you can go report things in the fashion that's outlined, or that more importantly, you don't think it'll get swept under the carpet, then that's when bad things happen, right? So how do we walk it back to say, hey, no matter what goes on, doing the right thing is always correct, and we're going to put it in a place where let's say for example, should the whistleblower function for any government agency reside in another government agency?
I don't know.
I'm spitballing here because if you say, hey, inside of in this case the NSA, because that was Snowden, that if there's a belief, right, and there may or may not be, I'm just saying, because that's usually the thing that causes people to do random stuff, is when they don't believe in the mechanism that's set up to basically to provide relief for something that's done wrong or those types of things, they go off and do random stuff. Right, and should that belong in another random thing, or does that set it up for retribution? There's that's the hard part when you start talking at a national scale when something's done that most people can't hear or see.
Yeah, and this is where I go, with something like Snowden, and there's been others that have done this, or not as massive as to what Snowden did, but I look at it as and I don't know what the right solution is, but I look at it, there was a failure of the Office of the Inspector General and those agencies that have this problem, because that's largely what their role is to find that they're doing a problem. And I think the reason why there's a failure there is that the Office of the Inspector General for each of those departments still roll up to the secretary of that agency.
Right. I was just getting ready to say that.
Why don't they report to the House? Because I think at the House of Representatives, in this case, that's the whim of the people. And the whim of the people that's why they're voted in every 2 years. But why not have all of these OIGs go there so that they can actually do their job? Well,
and I'm just going to be devil's advocate. The argument is the concept of never let a good crisis go to waste politically has never been more charged than it is now, right? So if and I'm going to exclude it from talking about today, I'm going to say in totality, right? If you're a Democrat, you want the Democrats to be in power in all three branches. If you're a Republican, you want the same thing, right? That's just it's the way that the system works. Could you exploit that? Right. The problem, if the Inspector General of the Navy is listening, your admiralness, please feel free to call the show. Right. But the net of it is, you're right, that the IG, I'll use the military as an example. Senior officers are 18 to 24 months and they're on to the next thing. And their job is to keep the ship in the middle of the channel, as it were, metaphorically, and hopefully leave it with a new coat of paint. Right? We're not in that 18 months. It's got to appear to be better than you found it, because they want to be the next rank, right? And I had a retired admiral tell me one day, he goes, the most risk-averse group of people on planet Earth are generals and flag officers, right? Because they want to be the next rank. And the fraternity doesn't allow for that. And then I'm not even talking at that high level. I mean, you get down into the lower levels and, hey, there's an expectation of how we play and we behave, right? And you can do the right thing and have the wrong outcome, right? And do you want to be that guy or girl, right? But that's, and that I think drives a lot of this behavior. And then on top of it, you take agencies or functions that largely happen out of the public view. All right, it's one thing. It's the Department of Agriculture. Something goes wrong. Oh, well, let's go over there. Is it a welfare? Is it a subsistence problem, right? Because AFDS and everything reside in agriculture, right? Or is it a farming issue, right? And there's petty stuff.
I think there's going to be somewhere in that Winston-Salem, North Carolina, along there. I think there's some, illegal chicken activity going on there.
The chicken robots are ready to man up and arm. But I mean, and there's some petty stuff that goes on. So prior to President Trump being elected, during President Obama's administration, the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Interior disagreed about something. So as part of a big omnibus bill, the Secretary of Agriculture buried in there that the Secretary of Interior should be paid less and outlined an amount. And that bill got passed. So President Trump's first Secretary of the Interior was actually paid less than all the other secretaries, I think, because of a petty argument that happened in a previous administration.
Wow.
Right? So this is, you don't need to have the big, to me, I'm like, I don't need to look at the big things. Let's go down to the basic stuff. If two adults in the room can do that, what are we doing on the macro?
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing that worries me more than anything else. It's like, dude, that's childish schoolyard shit.
It is. It is. So in going back to the fourth, I think some people, so in this aspect of unregional search and seizure, I think a lot of us don't know what our rights are. And probably one of the biggest things is in a traffic stop. Okay. The police are able to search within reason during a traffic stop for wherever the driver can kind of reach.
Right.
So, right directly under the seat, to the console, but not into the glove compartment on the opposite side. And where a lot of people, I think, mess up and I don't blame the law enforcement for this, but one of the exceptions is if I give consent.
Right.
Hey, can I look in your trunk? Well, they feel like they can't say no. Yeah, say no. Like, no, nope, sorry. No, can't. And they can't use that against you. Now, and this is, of course, I'm sure they probably do, but if you don't have to give consent. Now, there's some other things, such as, Terry v. Ohio, where if you are out in the police and you're in a in an area, you're acting somewhat erratically. This is that stop and frisk, right. Pat you down to make sure you don't have a weapon. Right. And then there's search incident to arrest. Hey, if you're being arrested, guess what? You can do a search. The plain view doctrine, if the cops actually see that you have a bunch of drugs and they didn't commit that illegal act, they don't need one. Or there's fire, they hear someone screaming, there's imminent danger, something like that, they can do those things. Right. But I think largely our citizenry, they don't focus a whole lot on this. That you don't have to give law enforcement consent.
My view on this is this. I think the reason that people consent and do other things is, by and large, the majority, and I'm talking the vast majority of Americans, don't have adverse contact with the police almost their entire life.
Yeah. Right?
Most people, the worst thing you do is get a speeding ticket or a parking ticket. All right? And it's speeding ticket. Shut your mouth.
A lot of speeding tickets.
What? You get
a lot of speeding tickets.
Right. But I mean, hey, be respectful of the police officer, and then deal with it, right? I mean, people go mental of thinking it's like, hey, yes, it's not a suggestion when it's up there, right? And I think Virginia's laws are silly on speeding, right? Because if you're more than 20, it's automatic reckless, and if you're anything over 80, it's automatic reckless, right? And most other states don't behave that way, right? And what it's turned into is the driving school industry, right? And when I was driving up to DC one day when we were working together, there was one of the, like the tandem tractor trailer. So it's not just enough chaos with one, it's two. And the back one was weaving a little bit. And so I basically, it was early in the morning, it was 4 or 5 in the morning. I basically got my giddy up on to get around this potential hazard, right? I creeped up to 83, get pulled over. Now I'm a reckless driver, right? I was, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full to the state police officer. And it was in a rural county in Virginia. And then I get the whole thing for reckless and all this stuff. So I start just looking in a radius around that township and finding a lawyer. And one of them said, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. I went to law school with the judge. All right, you're my new attorney." All right. And it was $500, and I had to do the driving school thing online, and it got reduced from reckless to a non-specific moving violation. All right. That's most people's interaction with the legal system in the United States. All right. So when somebody, when you get what you can, this isn't actually what I don't consider to be aggressive policing, but if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I want to search your car," and you think that's aggressive, most people just get scared. Like, yeah, I don't have anything to hide. Right. And it comes back to end-to-end encryption, right? Like, oh, well, you don't have anything to hide. That old argument. It's like, well, why do you have blinds on your house? Right. It's like you've lost me already. Right. And that, the Fourth Amendment, we don't, again, like what do we, most people's understanding of things, like, I guess that makes people like a loose, but we're watching police shows. There was a gym owner here when our governor, in what I believe far exceeded his authority to start locking down everybody up. Because in Virginia, the governor has the right to quarantine sick people from healthy people. He doesn't have the right to quarantine everybody, right? And nobody calls him on it. Short of me driving up to Richmond and hoping he picks me when I raise my hand, which is an absolute zero chance, because I don't know that guy. I'm not going to ask, because there might be a question I don't know the answer to right off.
And you don't have a press badge.
Yeah, I don't have a press badge. I don't even play one on TV. That's what we need. We need press badges. Now we've been doing this thing long enough. We need to go get press badges. All media outlets. That's the beginning to the end. If you give either one of us one of those, so just let you know.
Back when we first started this, and Jason and I, when we were doing this Life in Tech, Jason applied for press badges at Black Hat and DEF CON, and we got them.
That's awesome. That is awesome. That's the thing now. It's like, do that, and then we'll go to places and we'll just have a microphone and we'll do live feeds on people and ask questions, right?
Yeah.
But
by the way, conferences you want to have press badges. They don't tend to look favorably, but we just wanted to see if we could get them.
Right. But the net is now with the proliferation of smartphones, people are videoing the police.
Oh yeah. Right.
And that's where the uneasy tension comes. Right. And that's when mistakes happen. Right. And not good ones. Right. But when you start, I think electronically, when we start talking about illegal search and seizure, the problem is you have a group of people right now, primarily in the Senate, right? Because most of these bills about your privacy, by the way, folks, they pass in the House because the House is demonstrably younger. And then they get sent over to the Senate, where over a third of senators have never sent or received an email on their own. And I was told that by a staffer in the Senate. And that's the problem, right? They're old. It wasn't a technology that they're comfortable with. And they usually get paper copies of emails from their staffers who manage their email accounts. So how do we want them voting on something like that, right? Something as important as that, right? And whether it's EFF or, you know, companies like Wicker, every day they're out there highlighting, you know, hey, this isn't going to work well because, you know, it's not like your home where I can lock my home, and when I unlock one lock, it's not a big clue on how to unlock every other lock, right? And because we're using roughly the same thing, and and I think, you know, and again, we just live in some weirdo times. We look at what's about ready to happen over the holiday season, where they're starting to limit the number of people and telling people how many people they can have in their homes. And some governors have already said, hey, they're going to try to empower localities to go and check, right? I don't care. You can disagree with me all day long and I'll listen to you, but you're never going to change my mind that when we're the country that people show up at your door and walk to your house to find out how many people you have in your house, or whether you're worshiping in your house like de Blasio is doing in New York City with the Hasidic community. That's not America. That's not who we are as a people. Right? You're not going to change my mind. I'll listen. I'm not going to be one of these shout you down people. I'll listen, but you're not going to change my mind, because our fundamental ability to worship and our fundamental ability to do what we want in our own premises is foundational. And when you mix those two, right, you lost me. Right? And I'm pretty easygoing about stuff, but you lost me. And to see some of the video that's coming out of New York City right now, especially where the police are showing up because the Hasidic community is in my mind effectively under assault from the mayor, that it's crazy. It is absolutely nuts to me that that's the U.S. of A. in 2020.
So do you feel the same way about, like, you know, again in New York, the big weddings? So they're still having them,
right?
Not by the rules, but do you feel the same way about that since it's not your home now?
I do, and this is the thing again. And if this is the problem of getting the state involved in marriage, right? Because there's money in it, right? There's this state, and so is somebody getting married at a church, right? Is it a religious ceremony at that point? Right. That's, you know,
well, I meant now at the reception. Sorry, not at church.
Okay. But I'm not going to argue either way for this. What I'm going to say is this: if the mayor doesn't get worked up, right? Because already this comes down to city ordinances. You know, the governor's empowering like local government to act in a certain way, and if in the case of New York City, because we were talking about the Hasidic community, if somebody with all the demonstrations and riots and everything that they've had down there, where mass groups of people are demonstrating, we can argue whether it's peaceful or not, and that's not one thing, but mass groups of people are demonstrating. They're in most cases in the media, and they're empowered, right? And they're told, hey, look, there's this peaceful demonstration, they're doing their thing. Then to tell somebody they can't go see their father in the hospital, or they can't have a wedding, and the fact it's hypocrisy, right? It either masks work and segregation works and we need to do it, or it really doesn't. And we have to have a truthful argument about that, right? And a truthful discussion. And there's, you know, if you listen to the American Society of Pediatrics, you get one version of what this means. If you talk to some doctors, they're like, well, hey, do these 5 things and you're at a lesser risk, right? Unless I'm wearing a full respirator, I rebreathe respirator, I'm probably, you know, there's something. Why haven't we told people to take certain vitamins and supplements like vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, selenium, you know, and work with that, right? That's what a lot of the doctors are doing. And they're loading up. It's like, you know, the COVID Z-Pack, if you will, right?
Well, it's there's no money to the pharmaceutical industry for that.
Well, no, I totally get that. I totally get that. But like, there's that mentality, and that's the problem. Is most folks believe, hey, they're just basically wanting to hurt us up for the vaccine that's going to make us money. And I've heard recently, even here in town, it's like, hey, they just want to clamp down on us long enough until we say uncle and take the vaccine.
That's probably, you know, I think.
Right? But this is the problem with all that thinking, is eventually, right? And we're a lot closer to it today than I ever imagined we ever could be in my lifetime. eventually the people are going to say, and I mean the people as we the people are going to say, enough. We're not listening to the elected officials anymore, right? By the way, and we haven't been taught this in school in a while, but like, we run the asylum, not you, right? And people are going to say, we're not doing this, and we're just not going to abide by it, right? How are you going to do this? Because these are all requests that governors are making right now. They're not, they're not laws, right? And at some point, you can't tell people they can't have a livelihood, they can't go out and assemble like they want and everything like that. More importantly, when they see certain groups of people being allowed to assemble on TV, especially if they disagree with what they're espousing in that assembly, they're going to be like, F you, I'm going to go do what I want, right? That's the dangerous part.
It is. And this is where I go back with those wedding receptions. I think the governors that are cracking down on them are playing a very, very dangerous game.
Oh, yeah.
Because one, those are people's lives, and they're choosing to be married, and this celebration is there. You know, we can argue whether or not these adults should be doing things like taking their temperatures and being reasonable, but right. What the governors are doing is now they're taking away liquor licenses and things like that. So now who are you taking it away from? You're not taking it away from, you know, a big chain restaurant.
No.
Who can afford to make that payment. You're taking it away from the small business owner.
Right.
Who needs the money to put food on the table for their families. Yeah. And that's where you're,
like I said, you know, Joe Rogan the other day, he'd said something, and he's like, you know, eventually he goes, we have, you know, he gave whatever the million number of veterans there are right now. He goes, and these are people that actually know what violence looks like and knows things. He goes, eventually, you know, some of them are going to remember they took an oath to defend the nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And he goes, at some point, he goes, and this is, you know, and he was, you know, kind of saying the same thing I was saying, that like, we're walking down a path right now where people are like, wait a second, I've never seen this before, and I don't like it.
Well, and I think these military people have seen it before.
Well, but no
country.
Well, but here's the thing, like, how many, you know, like, you look at folks that emigrate here and become citizens, and they're from former communist or socialist countries. They're like, what are we doing? Right? Like, there's a roadmap for this. Right. And you know, one of the things I say, I've heard it from somebody else, is like, you know, America sucks until you go somewhere else. Right. And the bigger problem right now is you're taking people that are normally compliant and want to do the right thing, right? And that's always been my case about gun laws, right? Every gun law, show me a gun law that takes the gun out of a criminal's hands, and then we'll start talking about it. Criminals don't care. They have no hope, right? They're not, yeah, great. I'm already contemplating shooting somebody, so the act of owning a gun is a relatively small offense compared to what I'm ultimately prepared to do if pushed in the right direction, right? You start telling sensible adults that they and their families can't assemble and be with their families and do things that they want. And more importantly, that Barney Fife and his little brothers are going to show up to your house to count. What country do we live in?
Yeah. I'm going to be like, do you have a warrant? Okay, well, I'll see a warrant.
Well, there was a gym owner here that when they first came out with it, the police came to his business, said, you got to shut down. He's like, come back with a warrant and I'll shut it down. Never came back again.
No.
Right. And I was ready to go join that gym just because I wanted to patron that guy. But you can't do that if you're a big box store. Like a Gold's Gym, they can't, because they've got corporate policies and everything else. It's always that, you know, it's the little guy that stands in the middle. It's, you know, it's the Tiananmen Square thing, right? One person standing up against something that's really bad. And that's, you know, in my mind, those are that's the mirror, the prism we should be looking through, is what's going on with all the people in the middle, right? Because you got, I think, you know, in any political spectrum, you get 10% on either end that shout, you know, their politics at the top of their lungs and try to affect the rest of the people in the middle.
Yep.
And as you move closer to the middle, I think, you know, that mass of people that's where most people live, and they're on one side or the other. Right. And I think a lot of people straddle it, right? People are socially liberal, fiscally conservative, right? Those types of things. So how far, when you start to try to pull those people apart and pull them away from what they believe to be sensible, centered behavior, until we have much bigger problems than worrying about whether there's 10 or 12 people in a building.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be these local municipalities, state governments are playing a very dangerous game.
Yeah, it's power run amok. And I mean, I believe in Virginia Beach, like we have a centrist, or I think a Republican mayor. It's not like they have R&D next to their name when they run for office, but he's a sensible guy and I like him. But he is in stark disagreement with the governor over his policies. And so he's constantly a letter writing campaign. The governor just ignores him. Like, we're the biggest city in the state, and he just ignores them all the time. Right. And like, at what point are the citizens gonna be like, no, we're not going to do this? Right? Because all the governor is empowered to do is take the health department out to restaurants and bars and threaten to close them down. Right. And so people are like, I don't want to wear a mask. Well, look, you're not wearing a mask into this establishment because you believe you need a mask. You're wearing a mask so you don't put this guy out of business.
Yeah.
Right. And if you like this person, right, it's a local place, I know the owners and everything like that. Yeah. Is it chaos? I agree. I don't, but do the thing to not put somebody else out of business. Make your point elsewhere. It's like when, what's his nuts from, good Lord. I can't remember his name off the seal that the guy said he killed Bin Laden.
Oh, Robert
O'Neill. He's on Delta and he's taking his mask off, and then he's pissed off when they kick him off the flight. Look, it's a policy. You're saying to the people that work at Delta Airlines, F you, I'm going to make your day difficult. Right? You're not making a political statement. All right? You're not for the president. You're not for this and everything. All you are is a dick that is basically put somebody that doesn't make that much money and a flight attendant in a bad position that she can't defend you. All right. Everybody that's ever worked for me, I tell my kids, don't put me in a position where I can't defend you.
Yeah. I mean, especially in this case, because the flight attendants, they need to work too. And if we get to the point to where that we can't do travel like that.
No, I know. But that's the thing to me. It's like, that's where, people have weird outbursts about this and how they want to fight back. We're about done the weird outburst piece. People have just had enough. And especially when you start saying, hey, around the holidays where there's a lot of stress generated between now and after New Year's, and then you're going to say, hey, and we're going to have a change of administration and it's really contentious. I mean, and the fatigue of being locked down, you're asking, in my mind, it's a very volatile combination.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll get to the amendment about to where the conspiracy theory out there is, prior to President Trump's end of his tenure, that he will resign, which will allow Vice President Pence to become president for a little bit. So that way, so that the now President Pence, for the couple of days, can then pardon Trump for all of his potential federal things. But that's going around the internet right now. I think. And on that note,
zoinks.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I was rooting for there to be neither presidential candidate to get 270 electoral votes, just so I could see a once in a lifetime opportunity where the House would have to vote for the president.
All right, I've had enough. Now you're making my head hurt. Listen, you do this to me on purpose before I have to get off.
All right.
All right, my friends. Have a great week.
The rest of your day. Take care, everyone.